Welcome to my channel, I'm Gary Wiryawan, and today I wanna compare the Panasonic Lumix 12-35mm f2.8 lens with the Panasonic Lumix LX100 camera. Let's go! So today we're going to compare the LX100 to the Panasonic 12-35mm. These two things are very different. One is a camera with a built-in lens, although it has a micro four thirds sensor, and the other one is a micro four thirds lens. So a camera versus a lens. Although these two things are different in nature because one is a camera and one is a lens, they are actually somewhat similar. And that's why people have been comparing these two things and asked the question, which one should I get? The camera LX100 or the lens 12-35mm? First of all, they produce similar image quality. They are both sharp, they are both contrasty, punchy, and they have good colors. Both have very similar zoom range. The 12-35 in full frame terms is about 24-70mm, and the LX100 is also in full frame terms 24-75mm. So very similar. And also, depending on where you live, both of these things are priced very similarly as well. So now, I'm going to compare these two things by mentioning the benefits of both these items compared to each other. And hopefully, by doing that, you'll be able to make decision which one should you choose. But before I do that, I must let you know that both of these items are Mark I versions. So this is the old 12-35mm and this is also the old LX100. There are new versions of both of these things. The Mark II version of the 12-35mm f2.8 and the Mark II version of the Panasonic LX100. Although they are better, they are still somewhat similar with the Mark I versions. So I hope that this comparison will still be valid even if you are choosing the Mark II versions. First, let's talk about why you should choose the Panasonic 12-35mm lens. First benefit of the 12-35 is the lens interchangeability. So if you already own a micro four thirds camera with some other lenses, then you just need to add one more lens. You don't need to have one more body, and this is a better solution for those of you who are already investing in micro four thirds camera system. Next benefit, the Panasonic 12-35mm lens has weather sealing, meaning that you can use this lens in weather that is less than ideal. If it's rainy, if it's shower, if it's drizzling, you don't need to worry because this lens has weather sealing. And if you have camera bodies with weather seal capabilities as well, then it'll be perfect because your whole setup will be safe from bad weather. Next benefit of the 12-35 lens is the fact that it has mechanical zoom. So it's very tactile, it's very fast when you zoom, it's very precise as well. You can stop at whatever zoom range that's available between 12-35mm. Also, when you compare the 12-35mm lens with the LX100, this is slightly lighter. This is only about 305 grams, whereas the LX100 is about 390 grams. And last benefit but not least, the 12-35mm lens has better optical image stabilizer for both photo and video. And if you have a camera body which enables dual IS, it will make it even better. The LX100, although it has image stabilizer, is not really as stable as the stabilizer on this lens. This older version 12-35mm lens, it already has an awesome image stabilizer, by the way. However, if you opt for the new Mark II version of this lens, it'll have even better stabilizer than this guy right here. And that's all of the benefits of using the 12-35mm lens. Now let's move on with the benefits of using LX100. First of all, I'd like to think the LX100 as the 12-35 with built-in camera. So this is a compact camera with built-in lens, and with that lens you can cover the same focal length as the 12-35mm lens with a camera already attached. So you don't need to have another camera to use this lens. What that means is that if you have another micro four thirds camera that can change lenses, if you want to use a similar focal length to the 12-35mm lens, you don't have to take out the lens and put the 12-35mm lens into that camera. You can just switch to another camera which already has the 12-35mm focal length. I hope that makes sense. Next benefit, the LX100 with its built-in lens that's very comparable to the 12-35mm lens is a very compact solution when you're counting the overall camera and lens size. So this is how small it is, and if you compare it with the micro four thirds camera with the 12-35mm lens, this is so much smaller, this is so much portable, this is so much lighter. Well, I haven't turned on the camera yet and the lens is not extended. When you turn on the camera and the lens extended, see, it's extended just a little bit, and if you compare it with a camera with 12-35mm lens, this is still smaller. Another benefit of using the LX100 is that at its widest zoom range, which is equivalent to about 24mm in full frame, you can go down all the way to f1.7 aperture, which means better low light performance potentially when compared to f2.8 aperture of this lens, and also a little bit better background blur if necessary. Another benefit of using the LX100 compared to this lens is the fact that it has better macro capabilities, so you can really get close to an object and still maintain focus. Well, you should know that the 12-35mm lens also has good macro capabilities. It can get really close to an object. However, the LX100 is still closer when compared to the 12-35mm lens, although it is not a true macro lens. Another benefit of using the LX100 is that it has a built-in aperture ring. So if you're shooting in manual mode or semi-manual mode, then it is very easy for you to change the aperture on this guy right here. Last but not least, some of you might already know that I sometimes take pictures using off-camera flash with a technique known as strobist photography. You can check out my video up here to learn more about its benefits, especially for portraits. And with the LX100, I can really better take off-camera flash photography because it has what it's called lift shutter mechanism, meaning that you can go down to really fast shutter speed and still be able to use your flash or off-camera flash. And this is very beneficial for strobist photography because you can better balance the ambience exposure with the flash exposure, especially when you're outdoor in a sunny day. So in conclusion, if you already have a micro four thirds camera body that can change lenses, I think most of the time you'll be more than satisfied with the 12-35mm lens instead of having a separate camera with lens like an LX100. The combination of the 12-35mm lens with your dedicated camera body can give you lots of benefits as what I just mentioned in this video. However, if you decide to add an LX100 to your overall setup, you'll be more than satisfied with it as well. The overall LX100 setup is smaller when compared to a dedicated micro four thirds camera with the 12-35mm lens. So this is easier for you to travel around, especially if you need to bring your camera a lot. This makes a lot of sense for me. As long as you don't need a really high speed performance kind of camera, then this will be more than good enough for you and you'll be satisfied with the image quality as well. And that's all for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. Please comment down below if you have any experience comparing between a dedicated lens with a camera with a built-in lens of similar focal length. Also, don't forget to support my small channel by liking this video, sharing this video and subscribing to my channel down below. It will really help me to motivate me to keep making these videos for you. Thank you and goodbye.